virus breaks out, run for cover.
And when will that be?
Right about now.
Pirates of the Caribbean is one of Disney's most bizarre decisions in movie making. I mean, not the most bizarre, not even the top 10, but the fact this movie happened at all is interesting to think about. First of all, it's a movie based on a Disney ride, though contrary to popular belief, it's actually the 4th attempt at one, but the first 3 failed so miserably, it's amazing they want to try again. Secondly, it had Johnny Depp in the starring role, who was already a big name, well known for playing eccentric characters, but his career was in a bit of a slump by this point, and he'd never really played someone as daring or physical as the role required. Third, it was the first pirate movie in years, after a string of critical and commercial disasters that rendered the genre box office poison. And fourth, among other reasons, it was Disney trying to appeal to adults, as evidenced by their first PG-13 rating, and previous attempts by modern Disney, at least under the main Disney banner, were unsuccessful to say the least. And then, of course, there's the fact that Disney movies as a whole, both in their live action and animation departments, were going through a bit of a rough transition, and with very few exceptions, weren't exactly bringing the same critical or commercial success they had previously been known for. To the point they were starting to be eclipsed by new companies, some even founded by former Disney executives, who were bringing a new look to film and humor and making Disney look old-fashioned and awkward. Like a terrible internet critic who thinks he's in touch with what everyone's into nowadays. So when the Pirates of the Caribbean movie was announced, yeah, we all thought it was gonna crash and burn big time. The Titanic would look perched on Mount Everest, that's how low most thought this film would sink. But to our surprise, when it was finally released, it turned out to be a pretty damn good movie. The story, though basic, was pretty exciting. The characters, though mostly bland, were still memorable. The effects, though dated by today's standards, were unique and stylish, and the instrumental score, well, I don't even need to say anything. You've probably had it playing in your head since I said the title. And Johnny Depp, the element we thought would kill the movie, turned in the performance of his life, becoming synonymous with the role in the franchise and turning him from a rich and popular actor to a stupidly rich and popular actor. Before he just became stupid. It's the movie that spawned one of Disney's most profitable franchises and helped them through the rest of the hit-or-miss 2000s. And while I don't think the movie's amazing, and I'd be lying if I said I watched it that often, I will say that it's a great swashbuckling fantasy adventure with its own look and world, and just as fun and thrilling as the ride it's based on. And of course, being a surprise hit and a box office smash, the sequels followed almost immediately. None of which even come close to the fun of the first movie, and all of which fall into the trap that plagues most sequels. Everything has to be bigger, sound more important, have a billion plot lines that have to intersect somewhere, and lose most of the sense of humor that drew us in the first time. They're what I like to call but-first movies. We have to get this one thing, but first we have to get this other thing that'll lead us to the thing, but first we need to go somewhere that'll lead us to the other thing that'll lead us to the thing, but first we have to get something that'll lead us to the place to get the other thing that'll lead us to the thing. But while we're going to the someplace, we first have to go to another place to get yet another thing that'll lead us to the someplace that'll lead us to the other thing that'll get us to the thing. But there's another person going to the place to get the thing, so we need to use another thing to stop them from reaching the place, which is located in another place. So first we need to go to the place to get a thing that'll stop the person from reaching the place and getting the thing, so we can find a thing to get to another place to get the other thing that'll trigger another thing in another place. And God! Just stop! Not every movie has to be Dune! Just let Jack Sparrow find some damn treasure! They'll give him credit that the sequels were on a gradual decline, so we get one okay sequel, followed by one bad sequel, then 2 movies that exist. Of course, the quality drop matters nothing to Disney, and the movies continue to be enormously successful at the box office. But if you're waiting for another Pirates movie that recaptures the fun and magic of the first, I think that ship sailed a long time ago. So with the first film being a great success, and the sequel gearing up to be even bigger than the first, it only made sense for the Asylum to try their hand at their own pirate movie. You know, after already trying their hand at their own pirate movie. And a week before Dead Man's Chest hit the big screen, the studio cranked out their own straight-to-DVD Mockbuster piece, Pirates of Treasure Island. Gee, I wonder what famous story serves as this movie's inspiration. Well, it is another Lee Scott production, and even at his worst, this guy's almost never boring, so maybe that translates into an interesting movie? Let's set sail and see if we discover hidden treasure, or if all we find is fool's gold. Captain Flint is in the middle of burying his treasure on Skeleton Island when his crew member, Long John Silver, played by Lance Henriksen, mutinies and kills the captain, only for his partner, Billy Bones, to immediately mutiny against him, leading to a shootout that kills most of the crew. In the confusion, Bones escapes with the map to the Admiral Benbow Inn, run by Jim Hawkins and his fiancée Anne, where he dies shortly after. Jim discovers the map and, with the help of his friend Dr. Livesley, hires a ship and crew to sail to the marked island and the promise of a great fortune. However, the crew hired to work the ship turns out to be Silver and his men, all eager to return to the island and regain the treasure they were chased away from. And when Jim is caught overhearing their plan to mutiny, he's pressed into Silver's band of pirates and forced to help them find the treasure. Will Jim escape, find the stash of gold, and keep it away from the cutthroats? Does this movie name drop more historical figures than Liberty's Kids? As you can glean from the title and the plot summary, the movie is obviously an adaptation of the Robert Louis Stevenson classic Treasure Island, which, yeah, would be the obvious go-to for a Pirates of the Caribbean ripoff. It's certainly an influential pirate story, and one that's already seen a billion adaptations in movies and TV, including from Disney, who liked it so much they made at least 3 of them. Heck, even Ronald McDonald got sucked into the book at one point, probably his payback by the Global Gladiators. But yeah, for a quick cash-in to tie in with the bigger pirate movie, I could totally see the Asylum bringing their own version to the screen. Unlike most of their other sources, the story has long since lapsed into the public domain, so it would be pretty easy for the studio to adapt the book. Just take the parts they like and have the budget for, translate the text into screenplay format, throw it at the actors and director, and bam! Instant movie! Sure, it wouldn't be the most original film ever made, but I think we're used to that from the Asylum by this point. And they kinda do that. It's definitely a Treasure Island movie that follows the plot of the book, except when they don't. Yeah, it gets bizarre and kind of hard to explain, but I will try my best and hopefully not keel-haul myself in the process. The first noticeable difference is that Jim Hawkins isn't a young boy anymore. He's a grown man who manages the Benbow Inn with his girlfriend, which I can understand. The Asylum doesn't want to work with kids at this stage of their turnout, and a young protagonist might kill any chance of appealing to their more adult followers, so the customary 10-year-old playing Hawkins would probably be a bad move profit-wise. And you know, it's the change I'm most okay with. He still starts out simply and in a family-owned inn. He still wants to find the treasure, and he still needs help to get to the island, and he still appears young enough for Silver to serve as a mentor and father figure in his life. So his role remains mostly unaffected. In fact, because he's an adult, that means he can pursue a romance, engage in sword combat, man a ship if it comes to that, open a couple story possibilities that wouldn't be possible or just look ridiculous with young Jim. So yeah, honestly, I'm all for a more mature take on the Hawkins character. A lot more than I am with, say, Alice in Wonderland, unless it's this Alice. Another change is that, instead of England in the mid-18th century, the story is relocated and pushed forward to a newly formed America in the late 1700s. Probably so they could use more readily available shots of colonial buildings and early American house interiors. It's not a change that has a huge effect on the story, but it bugs me because, despite not taking place in England, everyone still tries for a stereotypical British accent. Yes, at this point, it's only been a few years since the Constitution has been ratified and the USA has become a bona fide nation free from British rule, but these former colonies were around for decades, even centuries before the War of Independence. Natural-born Americans were a thing, and while I'm sure American dialects over 2 centuries ago weren't as we know them today, I'm pretty sure some form of New England accent existed even back then. American and British pronunciation would still have sounded different. Sure, some of these characters would still have differing accents. Silver and some of his crew probably hail from England, so they'd likely speak with some form of British inflection. There's a French captain and his women who obviously don't sound American. Some of the less quote-unquote Anglo-Saxon actors are clearly trying to sound like they hail from other countries and colonies. I guess having Rhett Giles as the lone American military officer with the British accent he usually puts on would be a little awkward. But even then, he could probably be explained away as a deserter who fought on the side of the Americans and was granted a military appointment for his service. Everyone else, there is no reason for these accents. It's just them putting more effort in to mess up. If everyone had spoken in their native inflections, I wouldn't have batted an eye. I know we like to give actors crap for not doing a convincing accent for the era or area their character is supposedly native to, but here, just let the Americans be American. But okay, fine, understandable little overcorrection on their part. It doesn't hurt the story, and it's probably something only incessant nitpickers like myself would dwell on. But from here on out, the changes and little additions to the story just become bizarre. completely ridiculous and superfluous any way you slice them. Sometimes I regret not using the more colorful insults and expletives on this channel, because the only reaction that can truly sum up every one of these inclusions is what the f***. I'd use it anyway, with the censor sound intact, but that's gonna get annoying really quickly. So instead, when I say what the f***, I'm gonna replace it with a quote from Poor Richard's Almanac. So, here we go. You know how I mentioned that Jim Hawkins has a girlfriend named Anne in this version? Well, she's so upset with Hawkins' sudden announcement to leave her behind to go treasure hunting that she dresses up as a man and joins the crew. Now, that's again not a bad addition. It's a good way to work in a female lead in a movie set somewhere that wouldn't normally feature a woman, and they can probably find a way to continue to develop the relationship between Jim and Anne. But then it's revealed that Anne is, in fact, Anne Bonny, the infamous female pirate. A pirate who, I guess, just decided to give up being a pirate and settle down with Jim, who just so happens to find a treasure map, causing her to miss the glory days and tag along with him. I'm guessing because no exposition is ever given about her, other than she's Anne Bonny and she somehow escaped execution, which she allegedly did in real life, but outside of those two facts, there is absolutely no reason for her to be Anne Bonny. Especially since the real Anne Bonny, if there was one, would almost be 100 years old by this point. It's just an excuse for the Asylum to name drop a somewhat famous historical figure with no other reason but to name drop a somewhat famous historical figure. I mean, what the f-
If you could have half your wishes, you would double your troubles.
It's not even the only surprise reveal in the movie. At some point, we see another crew member who's obviously played by a woman, and then later it's revealed that she was a woman all along! Because I guess, in addition to a Pirates of the Caribbean knockoff, we also needed a Mockbuster of Mulan. Okay, I know female actors make up a large portion of the Asylum's cast pool, so the studio had to figure out some way to cast them in what would otherwise be a massive sausage fest. But seriously, what the f-
Tomorrow, every fault is to be amended, but that tomorrow never comes.
Oh, and the American officer who grants Hawkins and crew permission to sail in the first place? Future President Andrew Jackson, a man who should only be 20 by this point, did not serve as an officer in the army until much later, and who was well known for his lifelong hatred of the British. Apparently, we're attending the Bloody Bill school of anachronistic historical figures that completely lack any of their history. Just throw in Napoleon, Anne Frank, and the Titanic voiced by Jason Alexander, and you have a hilarious Saturday Night Live sketch from the 90s. I'd complain more, but Disney eventually did this with their pirate series as well. Still, what the f-
A fool is one who cannot conceal their wisdom.
But the addition to top all inclusions, the reason the pirates are chased off the island in the first place? Giant bugs. Yeah, Skeleton Island is apparently populated by 20-foot-tall beetles, and they make short work of the crew, both the first time and when they come back later. And, like everything else, there is literally no reason for them to be here. They could have been cut out entirely, and we never would have noticed. But here they are, because the biggest complaint anyone had about Treasure Island was that there weren't enough kaiju monster fights. I hope the Asylum got their money's worth out of the models, because what the...
Think of three things: whence you came, where you are going, and to whom you must account.
And that is only a sample of just how crazy this script gets. Yeah, I take back me saying that the movie has anything to do with the original source, because after a while, it doesn't. When it starts, it follows the basic plot of the book pretty closely. The treasure being buried on an island, Billy Bones fleeing to an inn, a blind former crew member giving him the black spot, the guy dying and Hawkins receiving the map, Hawkins' doctor friend translating the coordinates, them putting together the ship and crew for the voyage, unknowingly including Long John Silver and some other former members of Flint's crew. You know it, it's here. A couple elements I've already gone over are changed, but it still feels like a Treasure Island story. But as soon as they hit the water, the writing becomes a gradual descent into madness, distancing itself from the original source like it's a scurvy-stricken, bubonic plague-riddled corpse. And from here on out, I don't know what they're doing. We get Jim practicing sword fighting, we get a sudden storm, a couple shots of Jim trying to get his sea legs, and just generic pirate stuff like that. It has nothing to do with the Treasure Island tale, or that Pirates of the Caribbean franchise they're trying to seize the booty from. Look, I haven't read the book in quite a while. Maybe there are long stretches about pirates and sailors and how they spend their days at sea and what they have to deal with. That didn't make it into any filmed adaptations. And for good reason, because they have nothing to do with the story. especially one that has to be condensed for a feature-length film. And yet, most of the runtime is dedicated to filler. It's just stuff happening, like the movie threw away the meat and served us the fat and gristle. Every once in a while, we'll get something that resembles a familiar element from the story, like the bond between Silver and Hawkins, but without any context or build-up, it's just more stuff that happens. I learned more about the book from the segment in Pagemaster. The Pirates porn movie is a better mockbuster of the Disney films. Actually, that's not fair. That movie's actually pretty good with or without the porn, and certainly has more of a focus than this. I guess it's fitting that this is based off of Treasure Island, because the movie certainly feels like when the crew find the burial place where they were promised treasure, only to discover the chests are all empty. But fine. Weird stuff is what we're here for. It's the Asylum. We want them to B-movie it up. We want crazy out there scenes. We want elements that wouldn't work in a real movie. All because these changes and additions have nothing to do with the original story doesn't mean they can't be entertaining. If the studio can take the fluff, stuff it in a glamorous pirate puppet, and make it dance for us, well, that's all I ask of it. It's too bad then that getting through this movie is such a slog. I said the runtime is a bunch of weird things happening, and that's exactly how it feels. It's just something happens, there's a cutaway shot, then something else happens, followed by another cutaway. Action, cutaway, action, cutaway, action, cutaway, action, cutaway. And that's literally the structure from beginning to end. There are more cutaways to water in this movie than a talking cat. Flow or continuity is a completely foreign concept to this movie. Like they took scissors to the shooting script, threw the strips up in the air, and shot them in the order they were gathered. Scenes will just happen with no rhyme or reason, and few of them tie in with any other scene. Jim Hawkins learns how to steer a ship. Does that come back later? Not really. His girlfriend comes out as an infamous pirate. Does that matter? It doesn't. A huge storm threatens to sink the ship. Do they take any damage or any lives lost like the famous scene from most other Treasure Island movies? Don't be ridiculous. It just happens. And then it doesn't happen. Moving right along, bum. The movie is comprised of 2-second dilemmas. Any problem is completely resolved or forgotten by the next scene, which is often only a minute later. It's King of the Lost World all over again. Except, believe it or not, it's actually worse here. At least that movie felt like it was building to a goal, and there was somewhat of a path laid out for the characters to travel. It took just short of forever to reach the end, but it existed. This movie is so padded with scenes that don't go anywhere and don't affect anything, I'm not entirely convinced they didn't start making things up as they went along. I would not be surprised if most scenes were written right before they started filming them, and the dialogue was made up on the spot, like the film was suddenly guest directed by Scott Shaw. When they finally do find the treasure, it's only after so much filler and so many detours that when I was watching, I literally forgot that's what they were looking for. The namesake of the story, the centerpiece of the movie, and it's lost under a mountain of bullshit. Everything's random, everything's scattered, and everything's boring. And I'm saying this about a movie where they blow up a giant dung beetle with an explosive cannonball. Because if the movie's not invested in what's going on, then why should I be? The only investment I had was every 5 minutes screaming, "What the?"
The sun never repents of the good it does, nor does it ever demand compensation.
The characters don't help make this more fun to sit through. We get most of the characters from the original book, but in name only. Any personality or contribution these people had in the story or any other adaptation is either downgraded or changed and or erased entirely. I already talked about Jim Hawkins and how he's an adult in this version, but his changes at least add to the story and even open new possibilities, most of which are never taken advantage of, so he's the lucky one. Dr. Livesley, friend to the Hawkins family and fair practitioner to both pirate and friendly crew member alike, is suddenly a scientist who wants to go to the island to study the fauna, and later on, he dies. Captain Smallett, who's usually depicted as a very strict, very professional captain who treats his job with the utmost seriousness and is the first to be suspicious of the crew hired for the ship, is suddenly a French playboy who has no problem with bringing his harem on a dangerous journey and is completely oblivious to the mutinous crew. Squire Trelawney, originally the financier of the voyage, is reduced to Silver Stooge, who recommends Silver and crew to Hawkins and Livesley. And even Ben Gunn, the crazy marooned member of Flint's crew? Well, he was marooned. That's all he's given. This movie doesn't include other characters that are usually in adaptations, like Mr. Arrow and his rail hands, but it does include its own characters, like Officer Wilkins, Captain Smollett's entourage, and the previously mentioned Anne Bonny, all of whom serve absolutely no purpose and could have been cut out with nothing lost. But for me, the biggest betrayal is Silver himself. We know how this character is usually portrayed. Greedy, cunning, charismatic, and very patient, perfectly capable of appearing as an innocent, good-natured man until just the right moment to take over. But he's also friendly, intriguing, forms close bonds with others, doesn't want innocent blood to be shed unless completely necessary, and would prefer to talk it out and reason with others over an all-out brawl. There's a duality to this character. That's the reason he's considered the true main character of the story, and why he's persisted in media to this day. Nearly every performance being regarded as memorable and the best part of the movie or show. Here? Completely one-dimensional bad guy. Greedy, rude, perverted, miserable, and as subtle as Jafar from Aladdin. This guy has no problem with giving villainous speeches and planning mutinies in front of his crew, right where anyone can just walk right in and overhear them. Oh, and forget about the smooth-talking negotiator who would rather haggle his way out of conflict. This guy straight up shoots unarmed men in cold blood, jokes about it, and when confronted about it later, shows no sympathy and revels in just how bloodthirsty and untrustworthy he is. Heck, it's revealed right at the beginning that he sailed with Flint and was the one who killed him off, destroying all shock and betrayal when Hawkins finds out that Silver's actually a pirate. And even that scene, they plant right in the middle of the flick, shortly after Hawkins and Silver first meet. So any chemistry they have in later scenes, Silver trying to take Hawkins under his wing and teach him the ways of the sea, is gone, as Jim already doesn't trust him. He's not even a one-legged pirate! The bare minimum you'd expect from a Long John Silver performance. This portrayal is so insane and misses the point of a character so much, it makes Frank Miller's all-star Batman look canon. This is so not Long John Silver that I'm not even going to call him Long John Silver anymore. From here on out, he's Aluminum Bobby, Silver's much less successful cousin's half-brother, who, driven mad by his famous relative, has kidnapped a local stage guild and is forcing them to act out the same journey. Except he's never actually read the account, so the names and personalities assigned them are completely random. Also, the guns he uses are just prop guns, and they don't actually kill anyone, but the troupe is practicing their improv, and they're going along with Bobby's direction, enjoying the chance to work outside of their usual character wheel, until the old fart finally drops dead of a heart attack. And in 2 minutes, I thought up a better Treasure Island movie than whatever they wrote in a couple days. Get Blumhouse on the phone, I have their next horror comedy. See if Kevin Kline's available for the lead. And if the characters are already botched, the acting quality doesn't make them any more fun to watch. This is another example of autopilot acting, where everyone's reciting their lines, and that's all they do. Okay, it's not the worst we've seen. Sometimes they'll exclaim random things, and once in a while they'll give the impression that these characters know each other and they're not just a handful of actors thrown on screen and told to improv something. But these instances are very few and far between. Even when the actors smile, it's less, "Arr, I be enjoying meself," and more, "Oh god, I just forgot my line. Is the camera still rolling? I tolerate ye, I guess." I've seen less awkward acting from a Treasure Island Las Vegas casino show. And those accents I mentioned earlier, it's painfully obvious these are American actors pretending to be British people. Again, for no reason. And their choice of accent is just pirate movie. How do you think the non-pirates sound in a pirate movie? Well, they sound upper class and snobbish, somewhat respected and overly bland. Though I guess they're not that much worse than Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley. The only one who doesn't sound fake is Rhett Giles, and that's just because he sounds like himself. Or the self he plays when he's asked to be British anyway. I guess the actors who are supposed to be playing non-American or European characters have some variation to their accents that make them stand out. But if you thought the British accents were bad, how do you think the actors playing the French sound?
Today is your lucky day, gentlemen. I was going to take my girls on holiday, but I will take you and your men to this island. Perhaps it will be educational for all of us.
Saddle les horses, tout de suite!
Make way for le grand fromage.
The only exception is, of course, Lance Henriksen as Aluminum Bobby, or, as he's referred to while he's disguised as the ship's cook, Barbecue. You know how I said he wasn't on his A-game for the Da Vinci Treasure? Yeah, that's not the case here. This is a terribly written and terribly directed character, but God does Henriksen throw himself into it. Even when he's butchering one of the most famous characters in literature, I could easily see this actor actually playing Long John Silver. He walks funny, he talks funny, he's constantly moving his hands, constantly fidgeting around, seemingly changing his mood every other second. By guy, this movie's almost worth the watch just for him. The voyage didn't have to pack any live animals, he's all the ham the crew needs. He also has this trick where he'll appear unarmed, only for another pirate to shoot pistols from underneath his arms, which I swear I've seen in something else, but it's a good attempt to give him a unique attribute. That, and he steals the jacket of any captain he overpowers. But the true joy comes from when he opens his mouth. Not only does he speak in some kind of Irish Liverpoolian accent like John Lennon and Bono did the fusion dance, but his dialogue takes the pirate cliches to a whole other level. Nearly everything he says ends in some kind of reference to the sea, and they're idioms you would never think of.
We suffered greatly for that crocodilian treasure. You're young, you are. And I see you're as smart as paint when it comes to matters of the sea. I see that when I first sat down here. No one to help you? Must be the size of my pizzle or my charming disposition. We'll wash like a wave over the decks and take back what's ours. And may a cucumber fish sail right up my arse if I'm a lion.
Why, those thieving toads, freshwater amphibians, blistering barnacles!
And tell me, if you sat down to watch a Treasure Island movie where Long John Silver dies, would you, in a million years, think he'd go out with these as his dying words?
It takes 26 muscles in your face to frown, and only 5 to smile.
Now that was true, but it was irrelevant to my cause.
I guess the cast from Dracula's Curse finally recovered, because we get a lot of the Asylum's usual stable for this movie. Tom Nagel as Jim Hawkins, Rebecca Cochan as Anne Bonny, James Ferris as Captain Smallett, Justin Jones as Billy Bones, David Schick as Blind Pew, Chris Anglin as Captain Flint, Jennifer Lee Wiggins as Polly, Thomas Downey as Andrew Jackson, Dina Naravallo as Squire Trelawney, Derek Kozadok as Jack Falcon, and Amanda Barden as Mary, among others. We also have Jeff Denton playing Dr. Livesley and Rhett Giles playing Officer Wilkins, which, if I was casting this, I would have switched the roles around. I like these actors, but Giles is usually on his A-game playing doctors and learned people, while Denton seems more comfortable playing muscle or action heroes. So to see them outside their wheelhouse just doesn't click with me. Joining the cast are Alexandra Boylan as Sophie, who'd go on to 2 more Asylum movies and the TV show Flock, among other stuff. Andrea Lee as Yi, who's been in Things, possibly most notably a recurring role in Instant Star. And Gerard J. Reyes, who seems to have made a career out of pirate media, including the actual Disney films and the sequel to the pirate porn movie I mentioned earlier. And being a Lee Scott movie, we of course have the customary Lee Scott cameo where he plays Ben Gunn, who tries to kill Aluminum Bobby, his gun misfires, hits him instead, and he survives. Yeah, breaking from tradition, this is a rare instance where Lee doesn't die in a movie. And I don't know how to feel about it. It's like Sean Bean not dying, or John Hurt not dying, or Sylvester Stallone dying. But at least here, I get that this is him winking at the camera, that they're intentionally trolling the longtime Asylum fans by showing Lee apparently die, like he usually does, then pop up again completely unharmed, which may be the only funny in-joke of the movie. Okay, Lee, I'll let you off the hook this time, but you better give us one hell of a death scene somewhere later down the line. Though I'd be very surprised if it comes from your next appearance. But if you thought the movie was already not giving a crap with its acting, story, or editing, it's the technical details that seal the deal. The camera work is awful. Some of the worst we've seen up to this point. When they're in the inn or the officer's outpost, it's passable despite a couple focus issues, and some shots are downright impressive, including this long unbroken shot from one end of the table to the other. But as soon as they board the ship and arrive on the island, any professionalism is tossed overboard. I get the impression the crew had very little room to work with, as nearly every shot from this point is either so close we can count every freckle in the actors' faces, or so far away we don't know who we're supposed to focus on. It's a constant struggle to keep everyone in frame, and half the time I don't even know if the operators knew what to point the camera at. I had to watch this scene at least 5 times before I realized Aluminum Bobby was teasing a seasick Hawkins by refilling his soup bowl. Because both Jim and Bobby are barely in frame. It doesn't help that the accents are so bad, I thought it was the captain talking and Silver was refilling his bowl as an excuse to stare down this woman's cleavage. Why not? They're not in frame either. It's bad enough when the characters are just standing around talking and it becomes virtually unwatchable when an action scene happens. Especially when it's in the dark, the camera continually waving around, and most shots don't last a second. If you can follow along with anything that's going on, you deserve a hidden cache of treasure. I especially love this shot where they tilt the camera up to give us a full view of the boom mic, which, wow! I thought that went out with Sorority House Party over 10 years ago. Oh, and you want to see Ben Gunn's introduction?
Quick! Into the woods! Which way? That way!
Yeah, that was it. I bet a gold doubloon that if I didn't point it out, you wouldn't have noticed. Of course, even if you could see the action scenes, they're not worth focusing on. Like Disney, this movie marks a milestone in the Asylum's history, as this movie is also rated PG-13, making this their first film to not receive an R rating, which I imagine they did to gain more of an audience for cash-in on a family movie, and possibly to avoid getting confused with that other cash-in pirate movie it probably shared shelf space with at Hollywood Video. Which, awesome! I can watch this on Sunday without feeling guilty. Now, I don't usually judge a movie by its rating. I personally believe that how a movie's rated is a sole reflection of its content, not its quality. And there are just as many good rated R movies as there are bad PG-rated movies, if not more. But without the blood, the gore, or the nudity, the traits that probably drew an audience to the Asylum in the first place, it becomes apparent that the Asylum has almost nothing else to offer. Everything has to be toned down, and without a good story or interesting characters or effects to compensate, it just results in really boring, completely incoherent fight scenes. The best we get is an extreme close-up of a decapitation, which, again, you kinda have to be paying attention to notice. I see why the studio chose not to make this rating a habit, at least not until they actively started producing family films, because you surprisingly can't spell Asylum without an R. This also marks the studio's first period piece, as it's the first of their movies to fully take place in a different time period, meaning everything has to look like it belongs in the 18th century, and it doesn't. Okay, give them credit, the interior shots look old and convincing enough to look like something from the American colonial period, but the props and clothing look straight out of A Spirit Halloween. Everything's too clean, too neat, and much more fitting for England in the early 18th century than America in the late 1700s. I understand this is probably the area they had the least control over, given their incredibly tight budget, but the pirate porn, comparatively speaking, looks more accurate and more appropriate to their time period. And it apparently had the same budget. I never thought I'd have two movies on here where I'd have to say an Asylum film was outdone by a porno. It's also obvious that they're not actually sailing, that the water was likely green screened in, and anytime we see a full view of the ship, it's either stock footage or an obvious computer model. To their credit, they hide the facts better than you'd think, with the camera either pointed down or at bridge level so you can't tell if the masts and sails match the stock shots. But a little advice, if you're going to use stock footage, maybe don't use footage with clear burn marks in the cells, like this is a 1960s grindhouse feature. Seriously, even for 2006, there had to be better options available. The music's fine, it's Mel Lewis again, and this is a guy who likes his backing tribal drums. We also get a main theme that would sound right at home scoring an MS-DOS LucasArts game, right down to the synthesized trumpets. And, for what I think is the first time for the Asylum film, we get a public domain classical composition as part of the movie's score. And all I can say is, what took him so long? The sound quality, on the other hand, is atrocious. Again, some of the worst I've ever come across. It's not enough that the actors mutter almost every line under their breath so their lines are barely picked up by the mic, but how audible they are is completely relative to how close to the camera they are, like the microphone sitting right on top of the lens, which again, I thought we were done with a long time ago.
Have you considered my offer?
Have you considered what you were doing?
Of course. This is the opportunity I've been waiting for.
Where's Livesley? He's safe. We were attacked by brigands. What is your business, Mr.
Hawkins, Jim Hawkins.
Hawkins, you're Mortimer's boy.
And then we have the complete opposite problem. The movie will just sprinkle obvious ADR in places. And not places where the lines are being drowned out by the music or sound effects. No, just points where you can't see the actors' lips moving, so they decided to toss some more dialogue in to give the impression more is going on. Dialogue they didn't bother to blend in with the background ambiance or balance out the audio levels, so it sounds like random lines are recorded later in a booth played at a much louder volume than everything else.
Barbecue! I can smell you from here. Come out now unless you are a coward. Barbecue! Can you hear me? Captain, to the left.
And just to be extra sloppy, they'll ADR pointless dialogue right in the middle of characters talking. So we'll get one line that sounds recorded on location, and then the next sounds recorded in a soundproof chamber.
You were here for something.
Blood, please.
I'm not exaggerating when I say this is the worst audio quality we've gotten since Legion of the Dead. There is no consistency, no volume balance, no attempt to seamlessly merge the on-location audio with audio recorded later. And all we're left with is dialogue that, at the best of times, sounds like Muttley mumbling under his breath. And when I can hear dialogue from a Hanna-Barbera cartoon from the 60s better than a 2006 movie, have your sound department walk the plank. The only area I can give them unironic praise in are the CGI animated bugs. Now these things have no reason to be in this movie, and just serve as more stuff that could have been cut out, but I can at least tell the animators had fun with them. It's the same team that worked on the alien war machines from War of the Worlds, and I can tell. Even though the models look like something from the original Monster Hunter video game, there is a fluidity and variety to their movement, with some realistic texturing and enough light and shadow work to make it look like they're sharing the same screen as the live-action actors. It's not the most convincing model work, especially for the mid-2000s, but for a team that was probably paid next to nothing to get these creatures fully rendered in 10 days, it's probably the most convincing and impressive attribute of the movie. At the very least, it's better than what we got for King of the Lost World, or even the later Sharknado movies. And, besides some random stock transitions and maybe a muzzle flash here and there, that's it for visual effects. It's really sad when I have to praise a studio for not being ambitious with their digital editing. The Asylum truly is the bizarro version of Lucasfilm. But of all the WTF moments I've already covered, there's one I haven't brought up. One certain shot that stands above every single other unhinged moment of the movie. It is so bizarre, so random, and so indicative of just how little anyone cared about making this look like a real movie, that I can't even talk about it. Nothing I can do would do the scene justice. Heck, I can't even play it for you. It's not enough that you see it. You have to watch the rest of the movie, getting a feeling for the tone and build-up before the whiplash of this absolute "what the hell were they thinking" moment can truly set in. What words can I even use to describe what happens? Okay, you know that Easter egg from Uncharted Golden Abyss, where if you play it on a certain difficulty, they play a blooper over what should have been a revelatory scene? Well, mix that with the out-of-nowhere Bruce Lee impersonator from the exploitation film Pieces, and you will have a taste of the true insanity this one shot contains. It's only 10 seconds long, doesn't happen until almost the end of the movie, and has nothing to do with anything before or afterwards. But it's such a magical 10 seconds that, like the ending to the Straight Story, it makes the sit almost feel worth it. Not that you'll have much to sit through anyway. Disregarding the opening and closing credits, the movie barely squeaks by the 70-minute mark, making this another almost criminally short runtime from the Asylum. I've had meals at Olive Garden that have taken me longer to finish. Look, I'm not saying that I wanted to sit through more of this movie. When the film's barely longer than an episode of Stranger Things, I don't feel like I'm getting my money's worth here. Even when I only paid $3 for it, and it was the cheapest disc in an order bundle that also included War of the Worlds, Detour, and Win a Killer calls. It's the final sign that nobody cared about this movie, especially not enough to get it to a decent runtime, and that even the pirate movie had more dignity and understanding of its source material. And yes, the pirate's porno was longer than this. Say it with me. What the actual...
Do you love life? Then do not squander time, for that is the stuff life is made of.
This movie is a disaster, the biggest maritime embarrassment since the Battle of May Island. It starts as a somewhat coherent take on the Treasure Island story, before diving headfirst into the shallows of insanity. And not even good insanity. Incoherent insanity, where things just happen for the sake of happening, scenes are over before they begin, and the world and character building are as solid as soggy hardtack. Maybe everyone did have fun making this movie, but there's a difference between being passionate about a project and straight up not giving a shit. And none of that fun shows in the final product. The characters are uninteresting, the actors' deliveries are flat, the structure has no cohesion, the action scenes are impossible to follow, and the changes to the story make no sense or have any bearing on the plot. And don't get me started again on the camera work or sound quality. I guess it's not completely boring, especially compared to other titles I've had to sit through, but it is annoying. Annoying, headache-inducing nonsense. Even with the magic of Lance Henriksen and just the random and unbelievable what the moments the movie throws at us, it's just not fun to watch. Unless you're that much of a Lance Henriksen fan, or really that curious about the movie's insanity, especially that one scene towards the end, and you can feel like you can stomach the whiplash-inducing editing, you can go ahead and sail on by this flick. If this is what a pirate's life is like, then it is definitely not for me. Well, that's a shame. This was a movie I was actually looking forward to, and it's one of the worst in the Asylum's catalog. I need a movie that will perk me up from this. Maybe one based off a Samuel L. Jackson movie. Does the Asylum have anything like that? Well, can't be any worse than what I just watched. Can it? Hey there everyone, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider supporting me on Patreon and help me create even more content like this. It's only $1 to get early access to my videos, and only $5 gets you a credit at the end of each of those videos, with higher tiers offering these and even more perks. And as you help me reach certain goals, I have super special content lined up for all of you. Head on over and check out my Patreon today, and I'll see you next time.